Okay, so where we left off, we had just finished talking about rebuttal, which I had just said is basically concession refutation. Okay, I pretty much finished with Tolman. Okay, this is general order of like our essays, basically, right? So if we look at a sample one of it, you can pull this up and read it, and you can see that it follows the Tolman. Okay. I'm not going to go over that just for the sake of time because you guys can read it on your own. But remember too, okay, that this infographic is helpful for you. And then this breaks it down in case you can't read the infographic. Okay, so basically just there are 6 components: claim, grounds, warrant, backing, qualifier, rebuttal. Right? The Aristotelian argument or the classical argument is the one that we most commonly fall back on. I think it's the most simple, which sometimes means it's the best, right? Sometimes if we want to go with for simplicity to convey our argument, especially in this context, right? And so it's called Aristotelian because it's Aristotle who founded it, right? And so we talk about the rhetorical triangle. He came up with that, and the interaction between the speaker, the audience, and the subject, and then logos, ethos, pathos. Okay. Here is the basic format, and it is a loose structure, but these are the things that need to occur in an Aristotelian or classical argument. Introduce the issue. Okay, I like that right. So usually I say make sure at the end of your introduction that you have your argument or your claim. You can be a little more creative with that in AP, right? So as long as your argument is somewhere in that opening, you're okay. But it just sometimes feels very natural for it to be at the end. Wherever you put it in the opening, make sure that you've introduced your issue. I suggest opening up with background information, the context, and both sides of the issue so that when you state your opinion, the reader can follow your line of logic there. So like if we're talking about the GMO prompt that you guys did on the synthesis task, introducing the benefits and the I guess cons, I can't think of a better word, the pros and cons of GMOs in the first few sentences is key so that when you state your claim, the reader has an understanding of the complexity of the issue and the context and the conversation that's already happening. Then you present your case by explaining the issue in detail, right? So you move beyond the background information, why something must be done or why a way of thinking isn't working, and this is your body. Okay, so it may be 1, 2, 3 body paragraphs. It's up to you and the particular issue you're addressing. Then you address the opposition. We know this is the concession refutation. Okay, it does not have to be anywhere in particular in the essay. Where you place it is part of determining an effective line of reasoning. So you want to make sure that wherever you put the concession refutation, it makes sense, right? So in some of your arguments about, again, the GMO prompt, there were discrepancies in where the concession and refutation would best fit, right? Depending on where what your line of reasoning was. Some of you, it would have fit better if it were the first body paragraph. Some of you, it would have made more sense if it were the middle. And some of you, it actually would have served as a really effective conclusion. That led into sort of a call to action or something like that. So you really need to think about where is that concession refutation going to fit and be the most effective, because you don't want it to be something that dulls your argument, but you also don't want it to necessarily take precedence over your argument. Then you provide your proof again after conceding. Okay, so this is the concession. Providing your proof is the refutation. So like this is what the opposition says, but here's why they're crazy, right? So this is what the opposition says about GM foods and the potential risks they present for health and safety. And here is the facts, right? Like blah, 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 blah. Present your conclusion. Okay, you not only remind your readers of your main point or thesis, but you give a call to action, okay, or a call to belief, Or you end with a rhetorical question that maybe challenges your audience to be more empathetic or more cognizant of an issue or to check their privilege or whatever it is, okay? You want to end not just with a, this is what I've said, right? End with a so what, not an as I said. And then the Aristotelian infographic. For those of you who are visual, this might be helpful for you. To be quite honest with you, I prefer the nitty-gritty right here, okay? But that's available to you if you want it. And then again, another sample Aristotelian argument. So this is about legalizing marijuana. And then the Rogerian argument. This one is really effective for particularly touchy issues, controversial issues. And I will say in general, the AP board, college board, avoids super controversial issues. So, for example, last year's prompt was to argue about something that's overrated. Okay, they're not going to ask you about abortion. They're not going to ask you about LGBTQ rights. They're not going to ask you about things like that because they're trying to pick things that are not going to elicit super emotional responses. But when we do argue about super emotional things, which we do all the time, politically, socially, religiously, whatever, Rogerian is a really effective tool because it's not about who wins or loses. Okay? So here's basically the breakdown. If you want to do, this is my assertion and here's why I'm right, you want a classical. If you want to include a lot of detail and a lot of analysis in your argument, Tolman is the way to go. But if you want to address the complexity and controversy of an issue with an audience that maybe is really difficult or you know is not going to agree with you, Rogerian is that middle ground. Okay? Rogerian is the way to go. It softens the blow. Okay. So really, if we think about it politically, we should all be trying to find some Rogerian middle ground here. Right? We don't want to be polarized in our politics, for example, because then nothing gets done. So if the Senate and the House of Representatives are willing to be more Rogerian in their interactions with one another, we're finding middle ground. We're walking the aisle, right? So I always think of John McCain. John McCain is the Rogerian argument. Okay? He can walk the aisle. Rest in peace. So in your essay, you first introduce the problem, always. Give context and background in both sides. Show both sides. Yield to the complexity of the issue. Acknowledge that it is maybe not as black and white as some people think, etc., etc. And you acknowledge the other side first. Okay, that's the key here. So in Aristotelian, you can put the concession and refutation anywhere you want. But for it to be a true Aristotelian or classical, you put it kind of in the middle or at the end. For Rogerian, it's right at the beginning of your body paragraphs. Okay? Then you carefully present your side, but you don't refute the opposite side, right? So you are basically carrying both in your hands, right? And you're treating them equally. So you're like, look, this person is has very valid concerns, but I also have very valid concerns. We've got to find a middle ground, okay? Bring the two sides together, okay? Help your audience see that neither of you is wholly right or wholly wrong. There's something in the middle, right? The gray area is where we need to live. And then, in your conclusion, state that balanced perspective. Give them a call to belief. Like, this is really where we should go. This is the moderate way for things to get done. Here's how we're both going to benefit. Here's what we need to do as a reaction to this particular issue. Okay. So this is very effective for qualification in a variety of ways. This is very effective if we're arguing about certain moral issues because we know that we're not necessarily going to convince our opponents, but we may be able to cause them to rethink things. Okay. I engage in a lot of Rogerian arguments with family members that I don't necessarily agree with, whether it's like spiritual matters or social matters or political, right? Because I don't want them to feel disrespected, but I want them to reconsider what they're thinking or to think on what I'm thinking without feeling attacked. Okay, this is a really effective way to do it. And the infographic here, common ground. right? If we can summarize it in any way, common ground and bringing two sides together. Okay. And ideally, like if this were a debate situation, you would hear from the other side, right? They would get an opportunity to respond. Again, here is another sample Rogerian. And this is about homeschooling. Interesting. That's timely. And then here are some more things as far as like argumentation activities and stuff like that. We will get there. I'm going to probably revisit this website. Feel free to explore it. It is full of such good information. There's even a section on logical fallacies. And we are going to talk more about this, but these are really important. These are kind of really fun to talk about, so that'll be coming. But just to recap, where did it go? There it is. The types of argument, right? Tolman, Rogerian, and classical. Okay. You can also talk about or review thesis statements here. Feel free to peruse this. It's just got some really, really quality information here. Here are all the rhetorical modes that we've gone over. All right. This is linked on Schoology underneath. Let's see if I can remember. Here, 3 types of argument. Okay. That's it for this video. The next thing that we're going to talk about, we're going to keep talking about argument. And then we're going to, if you want to, I've uploaded the PDF of, well, I thought I'd uploaded the PDF of the textbook that we have in class. Oh, if you open it in a new tab, you can. And this breaks down argument as well. So I would encourage you to read through this. You don't have to like read it in detail. You don't have to do any of the activities, but it's a really good resource for you. And we'll just keep this instruction coming. If you have any questions, let me know. Sorry, my little one is a little fussy. And that's all I've got for you.